Then there were 100. All right, I'm exaggerating, but talk about a crowded field. The latest Quinnipiac poll showing that 5 Republican candidates are all tied at the top at 10% voter support, including Wisconsin Governor Scott Walker, who told me moments ago he's not at all worried.
Well, as a kid, I ran track, so my coach always used to say a lot of times I would win by whipping around the end, that last quarter lap there, and come in.
Me too. Although I was in a car, but good.
Well, see, there you have it.
Yeah.
But he'd always say, Scott, it's a lot easier if you just are ahead the whole time. In the end, there are going to be ups and downs. That's what's exciting about a process like this. I haven't even announced whether I'm a declared candidate or not. But when
the legislative session ends in Wisconsin,
into June, our session will be done. Our budget will be completed. And we'll do our 5th and 6th year on property tax relief, and then after that, we'll make our intentions known to the public.
All right. There are a lot of money types in the party that are giving to you hand over fist, as they are to Jeb Bush, as they are to Marco Rubio, and it gets back to my argument. We could have many candidates staying in longer because they'll have plenty of money to stay in longer, and you add to that the proportion of delegates, unlike before, where a lot of states were winner take all. What do you think?
I think that's healthy. I think the contrast to having a party that's anointing, essentially, a candidate that's not going to be tested out there. We're going to be tested. We're going to have to try out our ideas. For those of us who may or may not get in, we're going to have to go to the American people state by state, state our case, make the argument strong. It's exciting. I've run, as you know, Neil, you've seen me. You've been there firsthand in Wisconsin during the recall election. We've won 3 times in 4 years in a state that hadn't gone Republican for president since 1984. We did it not just for Republican votes, but with 11, almost 12-point margins amongst independents. What they're looking for is someone who's going to fight for them, someone who's going to fight and win every single day for hardworking taxpayers.
Well, let me ask you this, because you argue this debate is going to be good for the party, and maybe it is. I just wonder, when Rand Paul says stuff like ISIS exists because of GOP war hawks, what do you think of a statement like that? Because you question Rand Paul's filibuster-like performance in the well of the Senate, that it was counterproductive. I'm paraphrasing here. So I'm just wondering how divisive that is.
I just respectfully disagree with Senator Paul, and I believe the reason that we're facing troubles in not only that region around the world is because of the lack of American leadership. When you see it not just in Syria, not just in Iraq, you see it with our going down the path towards a supposed agreement with Iran. You see it with Putin creeping into the Ukraine. You see it with islands of sand being built in the South China Sea. I think there's a consistent theme around the world, and that is as people who are friends or foe look around and they see an absence under this president, and not just under the Obama doctrine, but largely under the Obama-Clinton doctrine. They see a lack of leadership in the world, and I think that's going to make it very difficult for the next president. Not impossible, but difficult. We need to establish leadership again in the world, and that certainly doesn't mean by looking around for who to blame, but rather to say, how do we have solutions that make us safe?
But that's pretty severe to say ISIS exists because of GOP power.
I just think he's wrong on that. I think, unfortunately, I respect Senator Paul on a lot of other issues. I'm a big fan of him on limiting the size and scope of the federal government.
And you could support him as a nominee if he were
Well, I think there's a lot of good things about it, but I think he's just wrong on this one. And it's one of those where Republican or Democrat alike, if somebody's saying something wrong, I'm not going to criticize him personally, but I do think there's a tendency out there for certain candidates to go after people on personality basis. I think we should talk about the facts, and the facts are clear. Americans are worried about our security here and abroad. They're worried about having a commander-in-chief who's willing to protect the national security interests of this country. And now more than ever, we need leaders.
Well, therein lies the second part of that rift, if you want to call it that, with Rand Paul and others in the party over this whole NSA issue and the Patriot Act. You had claimed that, again, back to what I was saying, that for Rand Paul to try to compromise that was a mistake, and what he did. His people immediately got back a spokesperson saying, it is a shame to see that the Washington machine has co-opted Governor Walker on this crucial issue. What do you think of that?
Well, again, it's one of those where you're going to see something different from us should we choose to get in. We're not going to take cheap shots. We're not going to go attacking other candidates or their campaigns. We're just lay out the facts. The facts are pretty clear. Anyone who's seen the videos of the Iranian and burned alive in a cage, anyone who's seen the videotape of the Egyptian Christians who were beheaded or shot, anyone who's seen what's happened in France and in Belgium and in
Canada,
what does that have to do
with the NSA?
Well, it all ties together. We see a growing trend. I think now more than ever, Americans realize this isn't something that's just happening over there. I mean, France is a good example. I think that many people look at what happened in France and say that was because the French government for a while was tracking individuals like this for a variety of reasons, financial and otherwise. They set it aside. Now you see an overreaction, or what some may argue might be an overreaction in terms of the people in France to go even further than the Patriot Act because of what they saw there. We need to have a responsible way that is legal and constitutional, but a way that we can make sure that if someone is an enemy combatant or aligned with an enemy combatant in the United States and the people of this great country, we've got to have the tools we need to prevent another act.
Well, would you be okay then in the future if the government wanted to collect 120 million Americans' phone records just to be safe?
No, I think this is where the balance has got to be on. There's some who blindly want to go down one way.
Do you think that part was a mistake?
There are others who want to go too far the other way, but I think there's a way to put in place appropriate checks and balances to ensure we protect the very civil liberties that American men and women have fought for so long in our military, but do so in a way that doesn't just concede their ability to track enemy combatants and those that would seek to do harm.
Switching back to your state and what's going on, you made mandatory ultrasounds in your state. I think you had said to the effect that sometimes when you see an ultrasound of your child, you're talking about your own sons in this case, that it's kind of cool. Now, I knew what you meant by that, but obviously that was not the reception that you got at Planned Parenthood, whose president put out a statement. Women are very clear that forced government ultrasounds are not cool. What do you think?
Well, they're just wrong. This is a typical example of the left, not just leftist organizations, but some even on the left in the media, take out of context comments out there. You're right. I talked about my kids are 19 and 20. Tonette and I still have the first ultrasound picture that was taken of both, and that's something we treasure. That was each of our children. In fact, Matthew actually had the side of his head turned so you could see his hand and his mouth what appeared to be sucking on his thumb.
That's so cool because mine had an iPhone. It was the weirdest thing. But you're saying, but immediately they said, hey, stay out, Governor. This is none of your business.
Well, and they're pushing back on it, saying I said it was cool. I think ultrasounds are cool. And they tried to mischaracterize. Our law says, simply put, if someone's going to go in for an abortion, we require whoever's doing that procedure has to provide access to an ultrasound, a traditional ultrasound, not the kind they've claimed out there, because we believe, as someone who's pro-life, I believe that if someone has access to seeing that information, if they can look at it, not forced to, but if they can look at it, if they so choose, if that's available, chances are they're going to pick life. They're going to pick the life of that unborn child. I think it's a great thing. And if they don't, under the law, they don't have to. But the reality is, I think those on the left are afraid of people actually having information. They say they're pro-choice, but they don't want an informed choice.
Do you get a sense right now with the race the way it is, it's still early on, that you have to pick and choose your battles? And I think of Florida because that could conceivably be a winner-take-all state, and delegates haven't decided that. But you raised some eyebrows when you consider the possibility of skipping out on that should you run for president, and I think let Jeb Bush and Marco Rubio fight it out. Is that true?
Well, just to be clear, what I said with a friend of ours, Laura Ingraham, on the radio this past week was that there's not a state out there we didn't think we could play in. People have asked you to play in this state or that state. I said Iowa, New Hampshire, South Carolina, Nevada. If we were to choose to get in, those are all states. Some candidates pick and choose which ones. I said we could play, I believe, arguably anywhere in the country. The point I made was the exception of saying what state could you win in. Well, I think it's a challenge in a state.
But if you enter the race, are you saying that you would compete in Florida?
Well, I think we can compete anywhere. I'm going to be with Rick Scott, my friend Governor Rick Scott in Florida, in Orlando next week.
We'll see you
there. We're not conceding anywhere. I'm just pointing out that Jeb Bush and Marco Rubio are going to have a distinct advantage.
So you think that one of them is going to
win a lot of their money?
One of them is going to win that state.
Well, I think that right now, at least the polls show, we'll make the case anywhere in the country, including Florida.
But you're not nixing it.
No. Because in the end, if I'm going to run and if I ultimately become the nominee, Florida is critically important. It's a state that, in fact, my grandfather was a machinist for 42 years, actually spent his last retirement years down in Fort Myers just so he could go fishing.
Not a bad place to do that. Real quickly, too, on the August Iowa straw poll, are you going to participate?
Well, we're not committing to anything until we make a decision as to whether we're in or not. Anything that requires, be it a...
I asked because many aren't.
Well, some aren't, and I get why some have said that. I think that's something we'll have to make a decision once we make an announcement as to what our intentions are. But we're not committing to any forums, any debates, any straw polls until we've ultimately made an announcement as to what we're doing.
But you can't win on this one, right? I mean, you lead in a lot of polls in Iowa. If you nix that, then Iowans might be offended. If you participate, you don't do well. What?
I think either way, in the end, what voters in Iowa want to do is they want to hear from you personally. They want you to show up. I was just in Iowa a weekend ago. We're going to be back again in the future. We're going to be back often. I spent 7 years of my life as a kid, from 1970 to 77, in Plainfield, Iowa, a little town of about 450, where my dad was a minister at the First Baptist Church. So we'll be going back to Plainfield and to Davenport and Des Moines and Dubuque and to Cedar Falls and Cedar Rapids and Sioux City and Sioux Falls. Well, Sioux Falls is just out. Well,
all right.
Friends of mine grew up just on the other side of the state line there, too.
Real quickly, you tweeted Senator Rubio on his 44th birthday today. You're 47. Am I looking at the next ticket? And who would be on top?
Well, there might be dispute depending on whose side you're on, but it doesn't, you know, I said happy birthday from another 40-something. I just think there's something exciting about.
Did he tweet back to you?
He did. He said thanks, and he's going to see me in about a week in Iowa at Joni Ernst Harley ride, where I'm going to be actually on a Harley like I have at home. And I think there's something exciting. People want someone new. They want someone fresh. They want someone from outside of Washington. Most importantly, they want someone who can do more than talk. They can actually deliver.